Hey gang, Jake here. This is the second part of A Champion's Upheaval, a small side series I've been doing covering potential representation for The Legend of Zelda in Smash Bros. As you probably already know, Zelda is a storied franchise with a legacy almost as long as video games themselves, but the Smash games have always focused on a trio of characters that certainly make sense as representatives, but don't always showcase everything the franchise has to offer. There's no shortage of great potential character choices, and to prove that, I want to take on a challenge. Today, we're going to run through every Zelda game and try to come up with a character that could make for an interesting fighter in Smash. Now before we begin, I do have a few stipulations. First off, I'll be coming up with a character from every mainline game, as well as the few spin-offs that aren't bastard children cast out by Nintendo. That means Cadence of Hyrule and the Hyrule Warriors games are all clear, but the CDI trilogy is shockingly not going to be featured. Second, I have to explain the basics of a potential moveset for every character, and when feasible, I'll try to avoid incarnations of Zelda, Link, or Ganondorf. Lastly, part of the reason this is a foolish endeavor is that I am a very casual fan of the series, and have not played all or even most of the Zelda games, so if I miss an obscure scrimblow from Triforce Heroes, my bad. With that said, let's get into it. First up, we have The Legend of Zelda on NES, and for our first pick, I'm gonna pitch the Old Man. My idea for this guy is that he'd be a retro rep meant to reference all the items from across the series that don't necessarily make sense for Link's kit. So he'd have everything from the fire rod to the ancient spinner to even stuff like the golden gauntlets. For Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, there's surprisingly few options, but I think a de-costumed Dark Link with a heavier emphasis on swordplay and sheer power would be... well, it would be from Super Smash Bros. Crusade, but it's all I've got. A Link to the Past is where we started to see the Zelda formula really be established, so while I'm still in the era of few side characters, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the Ganon card. Getting a massive pig demon with powerful trident attacks could be a great chance to represent a Zelda character that's been relegated to a final Smash for a long time. Link's Awakening is pretty easy. Music has always been a very important part of the Zelda games, and Marin is one of the characters who's most closely tied to that music. She could draw on the magic of the series' variety of instruments, using tools like the Wind Waker to summon the King of Red Lions and a Surge of Water for a free recovery. Also, a Final Smash where the Windfish crashes over the battlefield with a tidal wave sounds pretty awesome. Ocarina of Time is the first game we've gotten to that I've actually played, and it's also a game where the choice is relatively easy. Impa has been a common request as a fighter for as long as I can remember, at least as far back as Smash 4's DLC support. She's a popular character and a serious badass, and seeing an interpretation of the Sheikah fighting style that can actually kill sounds super entertaining. It could also be great to see her use some other Impa's fighting techniques in her toolkit. Stuff like Age of Calamity's Shadow Clones would make for an awesome ninja character. Majora's Mask has two popular choices for a rep that are about as cold a take as I've ever discussed, but they're both popular for a good reason. The first is a decloned Young Link, who would be a great choice if the next Smash wants to represent the biodiversity of Hyrule. P-Jiggle's already talked about that though, and if there's anything this channel isn't, it's derivative. So let's talk about the other Majora's Mask rep that's so obvious half the internet has already thought of it, Skull Kid. Skull Kid could be a great rep for a Zelda villain that's not just Ganondorf, and his special breed of trickster magic could be a real shakeup moveset-wise. There's no shortage of potential here, not to mention potentially the best Final Smash in the series. For the Oracle duology, there's really only two picks that make sense, and for me, it's gotta be Din. Nehru is a super well-designed character, but Din is from the Oracle game with a heavier focus on combat, and I think her control over seasons is better suited to a Smash moveset. She could be a War Mage-esque fighter who uses magic representing the 4 seasons depending on which direction is input. Side attacks could freeze opponents with a Winter Chill, upwards attacks could grant Din the power of a Spring Breeze, downwards attacks could send opponents into a brisk Autumn Night, and neutral attacks could have Din fight with the fury of a hot summer sun. As for Wind Waker, I really don't know how I can justify a rep other than Tetra. Tetra's got moveset potential, she's story significant, a fan favorite character, and has literally already been considered for the Smash series, and likely at least had some concept work completed before she was cut. Also, if she joined Smash, we'd officially have a Zelda rep that's more gender than Ocarina of Time Zelda. Incredible! My Four Swords pick is Vati, and I've already said everything I know about this character, but I've been told they're a pretty accomplished mage and swordsman with a unique petrification magic, which could be used to make a really interesting status effect. My Four Swords adventure pick is obviously Purple Link, the truest and greatest of all the multicolored links in the multiverse. And for Minish Cap, Ezlo is a competent magician, and it'd be cool to see a character in Smash who's purely focused on the mystic art. Plus, he's one of the only characters in the Nintendo lexicon who could reasonably fight Olimar at his cannon height. Neat. Perhaps shocking even fewer people than previously thought possible, my pick for Twilight Princess is gonna have to be Midna. Not just because she's the companion character of the game, but because she's got a lot of unique traits, like her grapple-heavy fighting style and the fact that for most of the game she's riding on a bipedal wolf. She's also one of the funniest and most entertaining characters in the Zelda franchise, so I'm sure she'd be a great fit here in Smash. Phantom Hourglass is perhaps the Zelda game I know the least about, so I'm gonna have to give it to Linebeck. Not for any substantial gameplay reason, but purely because he'd single-handedly raised the collective trans-mask swag of the roster by a substantial degree. Maybe he fights with boat parts and his opponents get hit by his girlfriend's encroaching ship for his final smash. Maybe he's got an alternate color based on the final boss. I don't know, I'm not a dang DS Zelda enjoyer. Wouldn't you know it, the fake Zelda fan who doesn't know anything about Phantom Hourglass also doesn't know anything about Spirit Tracks. Fortunately, I've got a buddy who has the common sense to talk about games he's actually played, and he suggested Burn as a fighter pick. He's not the most renowned character in the series, but he is one of the only characters who's mainly a martial artist, which means if Ganondorf got a rework to pull more from Tears of the Kingdom, Burn could potentially inherit some of his toolkit, maybe? I don't know, I'm really grasping at straws here. But apparently he's also got an LT Great Claw hand, and that sounds awesome. Giving him a command grab so he can yank shit from across the stage would be super fun. Skyward Sword has a surprising number of options for a concept like this, but between Fi's fighting style being mostly original to Hyrule Warriors, the fact that I pitched Demise as a boss in Part 1, and the fact that Groose as a playable character sounds like the internet would never shut up about it, I'm gonna have to opt for Girahim. They'd have a really unique toolkit, integrating swordplay with trickster magic like teleportation and trippy projectiles. Also, they'd be one of the most potent troll picks in the game. Imagine losing a match and the victory screen is just this. For A Link Between Worlds, I know that Yuga and Rovio are both beloved characters and they'd both be great picks, but I'm gonna have to follow my bias and pick Hilda as an echo for Zelda. It's not super necessary, but she's a really cool design and the only member of the trio to not be featured in Hyrule Warriors, so I think it'd be cool to see her. Speaking of Hyrule Warriors, another well-designed character that'd be great to see is Lana. She doesn't look like any other Zelda character, and her combination of magic, gymnastics, and monster summoning could make for an incredibly unique toolkit. Her sister Sia is another great pick though, and her flail would also be totally unique, so for now, consider it a tie. For Triforce Heroes, I'm finally going to delve into the links, but this wouldn't just be any link. No, at the start of the match you'd have one link, but as the match went on, you'd slowly increase your link supply with a special meter until you've got all three. From here, you can enter Totem mode, which is crazy strong but can't afford to take too much damage, or else the whole pileup falls apart. Is that a stupid idea for a moveset? Yes. Does it sound deeply entertaining and intriguing? Absolutely. Breath of the Wild has the cast that I'm perhaps the most familiar with on this lineup, which is good because I'm technically going to have to pick 3 characters from this quote-unquote trilogy. For the first of the Breath saga, I think one of the original champions would be really cool to see, and I'm going to go with Urbosa. She's one of the most competent fighters in the Zelda series. Her mastery over lightning would make for a really entertaining flair for her swordplay, and she'd be one of an unfortunately small number of women of color on the roster. Before we get to the rest of the Breath saga, we've got Cadence of Hyrule, and while I'd love to use this section to pitch Cadence and spread Crypta the Necrodancer propaganda, I think the more natural choice is Octavo. He's a magician/musician who wields a variety of instruments and summons a variety of monsters, meaning he could represent 2 of Zelda's most important aspects: music, through his instruments, and monsters through the summoning attacks he performs. They could make for a really great moveset, and I'm starting to want to see him join the battle despite not knowing his name before researching this segment. I'm gonna go ahead and cover Tears of the Kingdom before Age of Calamity, and out of all the characters this game brings to the table, I think I've gotta choose Riju. Now, it may be a little silly of me to pick the Gerudo Sage after I already picked the Gerudo Champion, but hear me out, because Riju's a pretty cool character. With help from her Sandsteel Patricia, she could have some of the most entertaining mobility options in the game. And what's better than a sword, a shield, and lightning powers? I'll tell you what, a sword, another sword, and lightning powers. Oddly enough, Riju's got potential to be our first fighter that dual wields, and I've gotta say, I think she could do it about as well as anyone. Age of Calamity is the last game we're covering today, and I've decided to save it last because one of the characters on this roster has such an entertaining fighting style that it inspired the entire topic for this video. Sidon first appeared in Breath of the Wild, and we see him take up arms again in Tears of the Kingdom, but his style in Age of Calamity is by far his greatest. You see, in Breath of the Wild, he fights with no tridents, and in Tears of the Kingdom, he fights with one trident. But in Age of Calamity, he fights with 2 tridents. That's one for each limb if you don't count half his limbs. Not only does that give this hulking shark bro access to a crazy unique toolkit of stabs and more stabs, he's also got such classics as using a Sheikah slate to bat remote bombs like it's baseball, or using hydrokinesis to create a giant water shark, which he then uses his dual tridents to beat the shit out of you with. Honest to God, there's been some great characters so far, but Sidon is by far my most wanted, and he'd be an absolutely incredible fighter to see in a future Smash game. And that's about it. All the Zelda games I'll be covering today. I want to thank you guys for watching. This video has been a great time to work on, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Before we stop talking though, I wanted to warn you guys that content might get a little more sporadic this semester. Nothing's wrong, I've just gotten to the point where there's a lot on my plate, and if I prioritize YouTube, it'll be at the cost of my personal relationships, so I may not upload as frequently. If something strikes my fancy though, I'll be right back to talk y'all's ears off about it. With that said, I'm gonna hit the hay. Peace out. Oh yeah, Tingle had a trilogy of spin-offs on the DS. I guess that rep will be Tingle? I don't know, man, I'm tired.